Are you anti-state yet? This is an article in Reason. The first question that it asks is, are you anti-state yet? Being anti-government is the logical result of taking a close look at the state and its bloody works. Now, this is global, as it should be, because it shows you the deprivation, the depravity of government. People suspicious of coercive power have been on defense recently, or more accurately, their opponents want them to be on the defensive. The latest argument, sprouted by fans of a government potent enough to give you all you could want and give it to you good and hard, is that any eyebrows raised at the prospect of such an expansive state are evidence of racism. Aren't we tired of hearing that card played? Well, don't try to follow the logic. You might trip over the twists and the turns that it takes. But here's the honest truth. Not just skepticism toward state power, but a strong anti-government sentiment are the natural and logical results of taking a close look at the state and its works, and its bloody, heavy-handed works. The number is 262 million, and that is the number of unarmed people that the late Professor R.J. Rummel has estimated that governments have murdered. Of course, no one has an exact count. These are all mass killings that were accomplished by governments to retain control. Now, when you think about 262 million people, with all due respect, ladies and gentlemen, that's about the population of everybody in the United States under the age of 50. I mean, it's a staggering number. Governments have murdered 6 times more people than died in combat in all of the foreign and all of the internal civil wars in the century. Combatants. You see, the problem is that governments that start wars don't limit them to combatants. More often, they're started by murder of non-combatants. Now, it shouldn't come as any major surprise to you that the vast majority of these body counts were run up by, very, very totalitarian regimes. China and the USSR are two of the biggest. Germany and China and China is listed twice, by the way. Once for 76 million, USSR for 62 million. I can't even read that word. Oh, under colonialism, 50 million. That would be your democracies. Hello. Germany, 20 million. And China, and another 10 million. Wow. I mean, when you think about that, you have to realize the the enormity of this number. 262 million. Don't get lost on that for a moment and kind of glaze over. This article goes on to say, though authoritarians were busy stacking bodies or stacking up the corpses. I'm sorry, let me start that again. Unsurprisingly, the bloodiest body count was run up by totalitarian regimes, although authoritarians were busy stacking up the corpses too, even if in smaller piles. Democracies are also responsible for unjustifiable deaths, especially in subduing resistance in their colonial possessions. Think Belgian Congo. And in indiscriminate bombing of civilian targets during wars. Think Hiroshima, Vietnam. But to a lesser degree than communists, Nazis, and overdecorated generalissimos. In Rummel's book, Power Kills, and he's dead now, but he wrote this book and published it in 1997. Here's how he put it. It is true that democratic freedom is an engine of national and individual wealth and prosperity. Hardly known, however, is that freedom also saves millions of lives from famine, disease, war, collective violence, and democide, which is genocide and mass murder committed by governments. That is, the more freedom, the greater the human security and the less violence. Conversely, the more power governments have, the more human insecurity and violence exists. In short, to our realization that power impoverishes, we must also add that power kills. The simple truth is, nothing can come close to the mass murder of governments. Nothing even remotely resembles. All the mass murderers throughout all of known history haven't killed anywhere near what governments have, and just in the last 20th century. You know, in 1980, in the federal criminal code now, we're only talking federal now, we're not talking states. In 1980, the U.S. criminal code had 3,000 listed quote-unquote crimes. In other words, there were 3,000 things that you could do that would qualify as a crime. By the year 2000, that had grown in 20 years alone from 3,000 to 4,000. And now, by 2008, which was, before this book was published, or after this book was published, we are now at 4,500. And most Americans don't even realize how often and how easy it is to run afoul of these laws. There's a guy whose name is Harvey Silverglate, and he wrote a book. He's a civil rights attorney, or civil liberties attorney, I should say, not civil rights, because there's a different connotation between the words civil rights and civil liberties. He's a civil liberties attorney. He wrote a book in 2009 called 3 Felonies a Day that basically shows how everybody is guilty of committing at least 3 felonies a day, even when they're not aware of it. He says that the laws have not only proliferated, but that they've applied in unpredictable and arbitrary ways. So it's virtually impossible for you to avoid subjecting yourself to, potential arrest, prosecution, and imprisonment. You can actually break a law by accident and end up behind bars. You can actually break a law after having been created as a criminal by a government anxious to continue its authoritarian, in other words, government at this point is guilty of actually causing crime by non-criminals so that they can justify their existence. Therein lies the term entrapment, right? Time magazine, Michael Grunwald says, I guess you could call me a statist. We do need big government to attack big collective problems of the modern world. But, you see, he actually forgets and overlooks the ranks of those who are on the receiving end of the big government attack. I'm talking about the many, 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 many victims of the war on drugs, the war on poverty, the war on terror. We have about 2.5 million Americans that are in prisons right now in the United States of America right now. We have 5% of the world's 5% of the total global population, and we have 25% of the world's prison inmate population. The dichotomy of that, the skewing of those numbers is so severe, you cannot look at it and say we are anything but a totalitarian state. The International Center for Prison Studies says that the United States is tied with Seychelles, which is the country that has the highest incarceration rate in the world at 707 per 100,000 people. The problem is that, what these people and that guy who calls himself a statist don't take into account is the number of people who are killed or wounded or injured in some way, doesn't necessarily have to be physical either, by the tactics that are used to bring everybody into compliance. I've talked to you before about Radley Balco. He wrote a book called Rise of the Warrior Cop. He's also written numerous articles. In fact, I did a show not so long ago, which was off the Cato Institute, that showed a map of hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of locations where innocent people were murdered. They went to the wrong house, as an example, or they got caught in the crossfire, and all of it by law enforcement. Innocent people were injured. For the record, we've had more people killed in the United States, civilians, killed by law enforcement since 9/11 than we lost in both Afghanistan and Iraq as soldiers. That's a telling and frightening number. We've had more civilians killed by law enforcement than we've had soldiers killed in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. Now, some people would throw out they were guilty of something. I beg to differ. The vast majority of laws on the books, especially on the federal side, don't even have a justification for existence. And the possession of drugs is not a reason to die. I don't like them, I don't do them, and I don't think you should do them either. But that's not justification to die. The American Civil Liberties Union, which I generally don't agree with on most things, but from time to time they get it right, they came out and made the following statement. Police officers on our streets and in our neighborhoods are not soldiers fighting a war. Yet many have been armed with tactics and weapons designed to battle overseas. By the way, they got all that from the DHS. The result? People, disproportionately people in poor communities and communities of color, have become targets for violent SWAT raids, often because the police suspect they have small amounts of drugs in their home. And that's a true statement. Where poverty exists, there is greater risk of these, overzealous assaults and SWAT raids. And I would remind you that today I posted an article as a follow-up to yesterday's article that said the USDA has been ordering fully automatic .40 caliber machine guns. Well, isn't that interesting? Because turns out today there's more to the story. You know what else they've ordered? Body armor. Level 3 ballistic resistance body armor. I mean, the USDA is ordering body armor. Are they anticipating being chased by bulls while they're out there inspecting your farm? Excuse me. The order includes for each person a tactical vest, a white undergarment, identification patches, 6 accessory pouches. That's for magazines. Body armor carry bag, and professional measurements for gender-specific lightweight trauma plates, hard and soft, and a concealable carrier. Why is the USDA buying body armor and machine guns? I mean, I don't understand. The USDA has no mandate to have a SWAT team. It's the Department of Agriculture. How does SWAT and agriculture fit into the same sentence with any credibility? You know, this article quotes a kind of an interesting piece from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It was written back in 1844, in which he kind of cautioned us. He says, "Republics abound in young civilians who believe that the laws make the city, that grave modifications of the policy and modes of living and employments of the population, that commerce, education, and religion may be voted in or out, and that any measure, though it were absurd, may be imposed on people. If only you can get sufficient voices to make it a law. But the wise know that foolish legislation is a rope of sand, which perishes in the twisting." You see, the point of all of this is that, and I've said this many times, especially on our Facebook page, if you're one of those people that even jokingly says, there ought to be a law against it, I would encourage you to think before you speak that phrase again. Because we know that the bigger government gets, the less control we have, and the more you are more likely to be found violating some new-made law, which really is only about controlling you anyway. Government is best, which governs least. Government is best that governs least. Where we are today is not even government, ladies and gentlemen. Where we are today is a dictatorial abuse of the power that we gave them, where the slave has now become the master, and the master has now become the slave. We're no longer looked upon as the master. We're looked upon as the enemy. And it's everywhere. It's not just limited to law enforcement. It's Obamacare. It's the IRS. It's the EPA. It's the USDA. It's your local sheriff. It's your local city police force. It is every federal government agency. It's the National Park Service. It's the park ranger, who used to be, I don't know, when I was growing up, akin to Smokey the Bear. Who now, instead of wearing a full coat of fur, seems to just wear a little mustache that just about balances out with the outside edges of its nose. If you are not anti-government, and when I say that, there are those who would say, see, you're just some kind of radical. I'm not. I'm just looking at the facts, and I'm determining them for what they are. When 262 million people are dead at the hands of their own governments, clearly government is a problem. And if you haven't noticed the enormous growth of government and the enormous overreach of government that's going on around you every moment of every day, and growing not by leaps and bounds, but more like a tidal wave, then I guess you and I are looking through a different lens. We stand to gain nothing from all of this government overreach. It has not made your life better. It has not made you freer. It has not made you more productive. It has not made you wealthier. It has not increased your opportunity for choice, for free will. It has not opened up free enterprise. It has not improved the economy of our nation. It has not improved the production of business. It has not increased jobs. Every aspect of government growth is negative. Every single one. We've lost our jobs to foreign interests. Our own government now seeks every way in which they can to destroy free enterprise and the job market. I mean, how else is it? We've got the highest unemployment rates we've had since the 1970s, for crying out loud. And even that we can't get the truth about because government lies to us at every opportunity. Need I remind you of Obamacare? Folks, we're out of time. I'm starting to put a new tagline at the top of the show. It's get informed, get pissed, and fight back. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about FCC, net neutrality, and how this is a brand new monopoly in the making. And if there's one thing that has proven that big government doesn't work and that when hands off is the rule, that ingenuity and creativity flourish, it's the internet, folks. I get it. There's some negatives about it. But nothing has created this level of jobs and ingenuity and creativity and independent individual wealth. Nothing. At least not in modern history. All right. If you have a chance, Friday, May 16th at 5 p.m., please make sure that you visit the Willow Springs Police and Fire Department building. At the fire department location, they're going to be having a spaghetti dinner and a silent auction as a benefit for Owen Moore. He's a young kid who's been just recently diagnosed with a very serious form of cancer. And they're going to have a $5 a plate spaghetti dinner and a silent auction afterward. If you can donate, if you can participate, if you can donate a product or a service or something along those lines that they can auction off, your help and would be very much appreciated, not only by the family and Owen, but by me. And so I would ask that if you could help in any way there. If you have an opportunity to, please make sure that you visit our friends over at Battery Station at batterystation.com. One of the largest purveyors of batteries and products across the country. They ship all over the nation, in fact, all over the world. They've got everything from batteries and all kinds of tactical and survival gear and bug-out bag stuff. And, I mean, you know, and I can't even begin to classify it all. They have ammunition as well. You can call them at 417-257-7799. That's 417-257-7799. And you can find them on the web at batterystation.com. We'll be right back.